Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Hey everyone, welcome to Behind the Book. I'm here with Karen, and we have an exciting show coming up for you, but we always like to share a little bit about what's going on in our world before we start. Karen, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you. You're the one with all the big news this week. I
Yeah,
want to hear all about that. Yeah.
it's been busy around here. So my oldest daughter, Ella, she just graduated from high school on Thursday, and it was quite the to do because we didn't know until the last minute if they would be able to have the graduation because of COVID and all that. And then we weren't sure how many tickets we would be able to have. You might only end up with two. You might be able to get a couple extra. Anyway, we ended up with 4 tickets, which was great. So for Cliff and myself and my younger daughter Emerson, and then Ella's dad. So we were all able to attend, and it was held at the T-Mobile baseball stadium in Seattle. So it was
Really?
it was this giant venue for, I guess, so I think maybe 400 kids were graduating. She's went to a really big school. I went to school with 400 kids at the most, and my graduating class was 62. And we had it on the high school football field, not the stadium. So it was very different, but it was fun. And then we had a party for her on Saturday with a couple of her friends, and that was really fun. And it rained all week except for during the ceremony and during the time that we had scheduled the party on Saturday. So everything
that
worked out great. Yeah.
perfectly. So when they called her name and she crossed the stage, did you all like scream her name?
Yes, we did. Emerson and I were very loud, and we had made a pact before the ceremony that we were going to, yell really loud. But Ella said she could not hear us; they were way far
Oh
away.
no.
Yeah. And then the other exciting thing is Emerson, who just turned 15 last May, or this just a few weeks ago. She tried out for the cheerleading team. She'll be a sophomore next year, and they had, I think it was 66 girls. No, 55 girls tried out, and they had 35 positions. So she really wasn't sure if she'd get on. They had an extensive tryout period of 4 practices and then an interview with the coaches, and they'd given them the questions beforehand. So she practiced and everything and got feedback. Her dad's a recruiter, so he gave her a lot of good ideas about questions to ask and how to answer the questions and everything. So that was good. And so, and then they went on Saturday and tried out. And then we had the graduation party that afternoon. And then the next morning, the email came that she'd made the team. So she was really excited.
So it was a huge weekend for your family.
It was.
So
And it was
can
a
I
nerve-wracking one for the mother.
ask what kind of questions do they ask when they interview candidates to be on the cheer squad?
Yeah, it was kind of like what you would kind of see with an adult interview. Like, what are your strengths? What are
Oh,
areas that you feel
okay.
you could work on? What could you bring to the team that others might not be able to, or what special qualities do you have? Also, they asked what the approach would be to building team spirit, basically school spirit, and how would they conduct themselves in order to do that to the best of their abilities and that sort of thing. So it was kind of an extensive question and answer. And she had her notes all written out, and she'd gotten feedback from all of the parents and everything. So it was good. And I'm just proud of her because she worked so hard to make it happen.
I was actually really excited to have Susan Boyer as our guest because she wrote the Low Country series, which is a favorite of mine. And I've always been fascinated when people write lengthy series, and you've done this test, but I haven't, how they keep track of all the details and how they work out the progression of the characters, and characters come in and out of the different storylines. So that was really fun to talk to her about that.
Yeah, and she had a great system. better than the one that I do, which is hit or miss.
Is it too late for you to adopt her system?
Yeah, at least for the older series, obviously. But with my newer ones, I have done pretty much what she does, but I still sometimes get things mixed up. But my editor keeps a master document. And so she'll catch things. Like she'll say, I think so and so had blue eyes in the last book.
Oh,
Which one
wow.
is it? Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful that she's so conscientious. That saves
Yeah.
you a lot of inconsistencies because readers do catch those kinds of things.
For sure. And I also have such a great street team and my assistant, they know the books pretty well too. So they catch stuff sometimes. For example, one time this was in my River Valley series, I had the main character of book 3 lose his job at the end of the book. And I'd completely forgotten that. And so when I gave everybody a copy of book 4, they were like, "Wait, didn't Ben lose his job?" I was like, "Oh yeah." 'Cause it had been like 2 years between the
Oh,
books, so
okay.
I do
Well,
not recommend that either, yeah,
I think it's better to go right from launch into the next book while it's still fresh in your mind,
absolutely.
because that's how the
Anyway,
readers are doing it.
yes, but anyway, Susan has that and some other tips, and she's just so much fun, and we got to listen to her adorable accent and also learn about some of her other passions like cooking.
Indeed, that's something I do not do well, but it was fun to hear someone who is so enthused about doing it.
Exactly.
We're thrilled today to have author Susan M. Boyer with us here on Behind the Book. She's a USA Today bestselling author of the Liz Talbot mystery series. Her debut novel, Low Country Boil, won the 2012 Agatha Award for Best First Novel, the Daphne du Maurier Award for Excellence in Mystery Suspense, and garnered several other award nominations, including the McCavity. Susan loves beaches, southern food, and small towns where everyone knows everyone and everyone has crazy relatives. You'll find all of the above in her novels. She and her husband live in North Carolina. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you so much. It's so great to be here with you guys.
We're so glad you agreed to join us. You're known for your Liz Talbot mystery series. Tell us a little bit about how the title was chosen and how you came to write the series.
Liz Talbot is sort of an extension of me. She's like my alter ego, and so I like Talbot's clothing, so I named her Liz Talbot. I always liked the name Elizabeth, so there I had Liz Talbot, and it's the Liz Talbot mystery series simply because she's my main character, and it's just a name I picked out at random because I liked it. Um, in terms of the first book, how I got that title, that was just really more a situation where I had that in my head as a title the whole time I was writing because it just seemed appropriate. Just all these things in the pot and it's coming to boil. And I just had this image in my mind. And so that had to be the title of the first book.
Did you envision it as a series right from the start?
I did. I always thought that it would be a series. I wanted Liz to be sort of a grown up Nancy Drew. I always loved Nancy Drew as a child. And so I wanted her to be that person. And I envisioned many adventures for her when I started. And I plan many more for her still.
So she's described as a modern Southern belle. She blesses hearts and takes names. So you shared a little bit already about how you came up with her. But what else do you two share in common, you and Liz?
Well, we're both Carolina girls, born and bred. We both love good Southern food. We both love beaches. She gets to live in a beach house because that's my dream. I would love to live in a beach house, near Charleston, and so she gets to do that because that's my dream. I tried to give her, some of my better qualities and none of the ones that I wish I didn't have. She's sort of this oh gosh, sort of almost my avatar. She's like this perfect version of me in an alternate universe. So the hand sanitizer thing, she gets that from me. I did let her have that quirk, and we both have similar features on the surface. We have blonde hair, highlighted hair, blue eyes, but she's much younger than I am. She's much thinner than I am. She's much braver than I am. I've never jumped from a running jet ski into a moving boat while someone was shooting at me, but Liz gets to do that because I think it would be fun. So there are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of differences too.
The most recent book in the series, Low Country Boughs of Holly, is a Christmas novel. How did that come about?
Well, I love Christmas and I just wanted to be with Liz's family around the holidays. And so I just started envisioning, the holidays with them in my head. And there were some things with the characters' stories that I wanted to kind of bring to not really closure because I wasn't finishing the series, but just bring to a certain point. And doing that around the holidays just made sense to me. So I watched, I don't even know how many Christmas movies. I watched Christmas movie after Christmas movie after Christmas movie because I was writing it not around Christmas. It was like, I don't know, June, July, in warm months. And so I was watching Christmas movies and listening to Christmas music, and it made me so happy. I was doing this for inspiration, but in the middle of the year, I was just in such a good mood because Christmas movies are just also happy. So I don't know, I kind of envisioned it as this, I don't know, Hallmark movie in my head on this island in South Carolina at Christmas time. And I even gave them snow because it has happened before. It's snowed on the
Hmm.
Sea Islands in Charleston.
Huh, I didn't know that. That's interesting. So, readers always comment on your dialogue, especially how you capture the characters' personalities and also your talent for conveying the local dialect. Would you mind sharing how you go about crafting dialogue?
It's just how I hear it in my head. It's how I hear the characters speak. It's almost like I have this movie. I don't know if it works. It probably works this way for you guys too, but I have this movie going on in my head, and my characters speak, and I write down what they say. It's just it's very organic. I hear their voices in my head and I write them down. I know that makes me sound nutty, but they come to me speaking the way they speak with the words they speak, and because I've always lived in the Carolinas. We lived in the Charleston area for a while, but I have not lived there my entire life. We lived there for a few years, but I've lived in either North or South Carolina my entire life. Most of it in South Carolina, and some of it in the Charleston area. And so I kind of hear these voices, and I just write down what I hear. And a lot of it is word choice. More, I mean, yes, people who live in that area have a certain accent, but it's really word choice a lot of times.
Some authors of series keep a story Bible to keep track of details. How do you keep track of all the details in the Liz Talbot universe?
I have a massive spreadsheet that is a series Bible, and I've updated it, and it's gotten so unwieldy that I have my assistant actually helps me do this, and it's 10 books in. There's so many details to keep track of, and I'm afraid that if I forget one thing, it'll be the one thing that a reader picks up on. Well, wait a minute, you said this about that character 3 books ago, and so I really want to try to maintain that continuity. And I had read somewhere, it was another author that I really enjoyed who had a series going. I won't say who, but she, at some point of a long series, decided that she needed a series Bible and started in the middle and had to go back and recapture all that. And I've tried very hard to do it from the beginning because I heard her say that. And I wanted to make sure that, so I kind of learned from that. And from the very beginning, I've been populating this and adding to it with every book. So it's a chore, but it's one that I think is necessary for me in writing a series.
So, do you have everything from eye color to ages and timelines and those
I,
kinds of details?
I do, and all the locations, the restaurants. If I describe a place, the interior of someone's home, that's there. So really, every place my characters have been that they might conceivably go back to, I put how I described it, especially if it's fictional, of course, and all the people, their physical description, their turns of phrase, what they drive, where they live. I mean, just everything you can think of about that person. And some of it changes. As a matter of fact, today I was updating a character's last name because she got married in the last book. And so I had to update that. So it's not just put it in there one time and then refer to it. I have to update it continuously to keep it up to date, add characters, but go back and change things. Liz drives a different car now than she did in the beginning of the series. So those kinds of details I have to update.
I want to know if you get any questions or suggestions from readers. You have any good ones to share with us?
You know, I don't really get a lot of suggestions, but I have gotten a few. People especially will email me and say, I think Liz should come to, and fill in the blank, wherever they live, they want Liz to come there to investigate something. So I get a fair number of those. I get questions. The number one question I'm getting these days is, when is the next book coming out? And I don't have a good answer for that yet. But as soon as I can possibly arrange it. I get questions, but I'm having one of those moments where I really can't remember a lot of the other questions that they ask. But I get comments sometimes. There was a reader once who emailed me because I had used a copperhead snake in a scene, and I did not, according to this particular reader, accurately portray the snake's behavior. And I readily confess that I have not ever researched copperheads up close and personal. I did read it online. I read quite a bit about it online, but apparently I didn't. And she knew, because she apparently, I don't know, has copperheads or something.
That's one thing I wouldn't want to be an expert on.
Me either.
We were preparing for this interview and I was looking at your website, Susan, and I've always known that you're a foodie and you're a good cook, but I had no idea how much of a creative endeavor it was for you. I was so impressed. You actually were one of 100 authors who contributed to the Mystery Writers of America cookbook. And there were like big names like Mary Higgins Clark, Harlan Coben, Scott Turow, Kathy Reichs. So I thought that was really cool. Can you tell us about your love of cooking, how it started, and how it influences your writing?
Oh gosh, I've loved food my whole life, and my mother is just the world's greatest cook. And my entire life, she cooked dinner every night, and she made these big. It was something, usually something fried, but a meat and three or four sides, starch and several vegetables and bread and dessert. And she made these big, fabulous meals my entire life. And I had a grandmother who did it 3 meals a day. So I come from a long line of Southern cooks, I guess, and I've just always loved good Southern food. Pimento cheese, and that was my recipe contribution. I was invited to contribute something to Mystery Writers of America cookbook, and then that thrilled me to pieces. I was so excited and honored to be a part of that project. And I used my pimento cheese recipe, which just to make sure, and like most Southern cooks and probably cooks everywhere, I cook more from, a pinch of this, a pinch of that, memory, this is how mom did it, this is how my grandmother did it. And I kind of put my own spin on things, but I rarely have a recipe to go by. And when I'm cooking, a lot of times, if I'm going to write a recipe down, I have to make whatever it is and write down what I'm doing as I do it, because I don't know. And I probably have never made it the same way twice. But for that recipe for the pimento cheese recipe, my husband and I, on a Friday night, we had all the stuff and we made a big batch of it in the kitchen. And it was like, add a little bit of this. Is that enough? No, it needs a little more. And measuring everything and then writing it down. And it was very, just a very painstaking process to make sure that I actually got the recipe right, because, it was going in a cookbook. So I had to get it right, but I'd never written it down before.
It was like you reverse engineered your own
Yes,
recipe.
I did.
Oh, that's fun.
That reminds me of a cooking class I took in Italy one time. And not only did the chef speak only Italian and very fast, he also measured nothing. And he was just dumping all this stuff in this big pot. And I'm trying to take notes. I'm like, wait. So I
That's
don't
the
think
way
that.
I cook.
Yeah, I think you and the Italians have a similar style. All right, so I'm always curious about where people like to write. Do you have a special space, or do you kind of float around the house?
I do. I have an office, and I generally go in here and shut the door. And we've recently moved to North Carolina to be closer to my parents. And so this is actually a new office, and it's actually a good bit smaller than the office I had in my previous house. But I actually like this space better. It's kind of tucked into the back of the house, and I look out the windows and I see the woods. I don't see, another house or the street or whatever. And I kind of like that. It's like having my own little tucked away place. And so it's much more secluded and private, and I feel very creative in this space, so I'm loving that. But yeah, I usually write in here. If we happen to be traveling, sometimes I'll go with my husband on business trips, and I can write in hotel rooms. They're very easy for me to write in, but I don't generally wander around the house at home. I usually just either am at my desk or I have a recliner over in the corner by the window, and I'll sit with my lap desk and write with my laptop sometimes.
I have a recliner in the corner by my window too, and use my lap desk and my laptop. That sounds very familiar. Oh, that's great. Does your family read your books? You mentioned your husband. Has he read them?
He read the first few. I think he is, of course, he's proud and he's excited and he wants to be supportive, but he doesn't have a lot of time to read. And he used to read a great deal, and it kind of bothers me now because he doesn't seem to have time to read anymore, and I think he's too busy. But he occasionally will read one on a plane, but I don't think he's read them all. But he says he enjoys them, but what else is he going to say, right? But my mom, I know my mother. I know my mother likes my books, and I know when I've done something that she does not like, because in the second book, there was a little more romance in that book than the rest of the series. A little more, and just a tiny speck of heat in that second book, and I knew when my mother called me and she said, "Oh, I finished your book. I really liked it." And I said, "Really? Did you like it, Mom?" And she said, "Well, I like the first one better." And I said, "You didn't like the sex, did you, Mom?" And she said, "I skipped over that part." I mean, she was, but she does read my books, and she'll tell me, when she's read it, and of course she's my mom. She's always going to say she liked it. But I learned, not to get too close to that line because, I don't want to offend anybody, least of all my mom. So I backed off of that a little bit.
Yeah, I remember when my first book came out, and it's a romance, and it had, a few steamy scenes. And I remember saying to one of the ladies at church, I was like, because they were all reading it and talking about it. And I was like, I feel so embarrassed about the sex scenes. And she said, "Oh, we've all had sex. We know what it is."
This is nothing
I
new to
love
them.
that.
It was awesome. I was like, okay. So what kind of books do you enjoy reading? Do you have enough time to read?
I try to make time to read because there's something about the mental. First of all, I love to read. I mean, I'm a lifelong reader. I've been a voracious reader my entire life. I read less now than I used to because I have less time because, I'm working later, and I don't know, I guess past a certain point, I can only keep so many characters in my head. And it depends where I'm at in my process. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm at a certain point, I can't read somebody else because I can't have those voices in my head. I can only have so many voices in my head at a time, or I'm afraid it will explode. So I don't read a lot when I'm plotting and outlining and coming up with the story. And sometimes I won't read things that are too close to like other Southern authors because I don't want somebody else's voice in my head. So some of the things I love reading most, I don't read during certain points of my writing process.
I understand that. I've had that same experience where I can only keep one fictional world in my head at this point. And like you said, it depends on where you are in the process. This is a question I love asking other writers because I can connect with it. Do you ever have doubts about a book, either while you're writing it or after you finish it?
I always have doubts while I'm writing it. Always. It's like every single time I think this isn't going to be any good. This is, and I'm always hoping. I really want every book to be a little better than the last one. I want to hone my craft every time. I want to be a little better. I want to learn something from the book before, and I hope to get a little better. But I'm always afraid when I'm writing that this one's going to flop. It's not good. It's going to be the one that's just not as good. I'm not, or whatever. So I'm always insecure about it when I'm writing it. And then after I've written it and I go back, then I start to feel a little better about it. And then after one other person has read it and said that they enjoyed it, then I return to sanity and I feel like, okay, well, maybe I can still do this.
And that leads into another question. How do you know when a book is done?
I'm an outliner, so and because I write mysteries, I'm once the mystery is solved, and I've wrapped things up with Liz's family for the book, and usually I do that. Usually the last chapter is sort of a wrap up with her family. It's kind of like a thing that I do because most of my readers really enjoy Liz's family, and they enjoy the time spent with them as much as the mystery, probably some of them more. And so I know that my readers want that. So the last chapter of the book is almost always a wrap up of the mystery, but also with her family. So it's usually at her parents' home or, with the family. They're doing something together. And I just kind of wrap things up. So from the beginning, I've kind of planned what the ending is going to be. And then after everything is resolved, I just wrap things up with the family into the next book, and then I know I'm done.
All right. So we're endlessly curious about other writers' processes. So you just mentioned you're an outliner. How detailed do you get when you outline?
Well, I start with who did what to who and why. And so I know the victim, the perpetrator, and then I start sort of circling outward, the other characters around them who might potentially be suspects. And I sort of develop the characters a little bit. And then and that's like one tab in my spreadsheet. And I have one for each book, in addition to the big spreadsheet for all the books. And then the next thing I do is, after I have the character sort of outlined in their role, I'll go and try to make one line for every chapter and like the plot point that's going to be delivered in that chapter and how my detective is going to figure this out. So I know where I'm driving to, and I just have to, over the course of somewhere between 30 and 50 chapters, help my detective figure this out. So I have to lay the groundwork along the way. So I just have one line for each chapter. And sometimes I'll have gaps in the middle. It's like I'll have a few at the front and a few at the end. And then I've got a few kind of stacked in the middle, but I'm not really sure which order they're going in. And so I'll rearrange things as I go. But I try to have some general idea what I'm doing in most of the chapters before I start. I'll start writing and I'll probably add things, and sometimes I delete things and rearrange things. But I mean, it's my outline. So it's kind of like a working document, but I can't start without it, or else I just go off on too many tangents and it takes me forever to get anything done.
So it's a really fluid process for you.
It is.
What part of writing novels do you find easiest, and what is a sticking point for you? What's the most difficult?
Getting started is definitely the most difficult. And I heard someone else use this term, and I think I do it, but I resist the writing for a while. And it's like I'm having a hard time getting myself to settle in to a book. Once I'm settled into the story, then it goes a little quicker. But the first several chapters, actually, until I'm about halfway through, it goes very slowly. The words come very slowly. But then once I'm to a certain point, once I've got maybe 30,000 words on the page or whatever, it's like all downhill from there. And then it goes really fast and the words are just pouring out of me. And that's the easy part. But the fun part, the really fun part for me is editing. It's going back after I've written it. I enjoy having written and having something to edit, going back and being able to then polish it and tweak it and do whatever. That's the best part for me, the most fun. And I think I'm probably the best at that. The hard part is getting the bones of it down to begin with.
So are you a taker outer or a putter inner when you edit?
I'm usually a putter inner. I usually go back and embellish things and sort of fluff it out a little more. My word count always goes up when I edit. So I'm a putter inner for sure.
Do you have an ideal reader in mind when you are drafting your story?
You know, I don't really have one ideal reader exactly. Well, maybe I do. Maybe it's me. I don't know. I'm writing what I like to read to a large degree, and there are people who enjoy that kind of book, and so I sort of have a composite, I guess, ideal reader, and it's readers who enjoy books set in coastal settings. And who enjoy mysteries. So there's sort of a crossover. And I actually have, I think, two distinct sort of sets of readers. There are readers who read my books because they enjoy the mystery, and then there are readers who read my books because they enjoy books set in the Charleston area. And there's, of course, some crossover there, But some people will pick it up because it's set in coastal South Carolina, and some people will pick it up because it's a mystery. And I'm happy for whatever reason they pick it up. But I think it's two different sets of readers. So my ideal reader, I guess, is someone who enjoys mystery set on the coast. And I have sort of a reader in mind, but it's not a specific person that I know, if that makes sense. It's sort of a composite of this group of readers, who are typically women, in a certain age range. Some of them are younger, some are older, but, it's, and no, I know there are men who read my books and I'm happy for them too. But I guess that ideal reader is the woman sitting on the beach on the Isle of Palms, who's within a certain age range. And I kind of see her sitting there reading as I'm writing, but I don't really know exactly who she is. Does that make any sense at all?
Hmm.
Was the perfect answer.
It is, yeah.
And I wish
That
I was
describes it perfectly.
I wish I was that woman sitting in the Isle of Palms on the beach with your book.
Me too.
I wish we were all there.
Some of our listeners are aspiring writers who hope to someday write a novel, or maybe they're already working on a novel. What advice would you have for them? Something you wish someone had told you, maybe?
Oh gosh. I think, be persistent, just stay at it. And it can be done. You just have to stay at it. And it's not that I did not hear that message, but I think maybe at a certain point I was getting too many messages. It's like I was reading so much on how to write and how to get published. And, people will tell you a lot of things. You will read a lot of things. And it's not that some of those things aren't necessarily true for the person who wrote them and maybe other people too, but not everything that you read is going to be true for you. For a while, I had it in my head because I read it somewhere that I must first publish short stories before I could publish a novel, or else I would never get my novel published. Now, this isn't true, but I did not know that. People who knew things had written that down and I had read it, so I took it to heart. And so I spent a lot of time writing short stories and trying to get them published. And I did get some of them published, but looking back, that was completely irrelevant to me getting a novel published. So you may read some things that are true for some people, but not necessarily true for everybody. So you just have to kind of follow your path, and not everybody's path is the same.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. So here's another question for you that I think would help aspiring writers. What do you do on those days when you're just not feeling it, when the muse is just not speaking?
You know, I try really hard not to have those days. I try really hard to make myself write something. If I have it in my head that the muse is not speaking to me or whatever, I try to make myself sit and write something. If I can just make myself write one sentence, then I can write two. And if I can write two, I can write five. And if I only get 100 words that day, at least I've made progress. And I try to make myself write something. If I'm in that process, if I'm in that cycle where I'm putting words on the page and that's what I'm supposed to be doing today, I try to make myself write something well, 5 days a week. I don't write on weekends because that's family time for me. But 5 days a week, I make myself sit in a chair and write. And if the muse is not with me or whatever, and we all have days like that, I guess my word count is going to be less, but I try to make myself write. It's just important for if I can let myself get away with that for one day, I might get away with it for two, and then time's going to go by, and I can't afford that. So I do things sort of in cycles. For a while I'll be plotting, and so there are these investment days where I'm working on the book, but I'm not actually putting words on a page, or I'm putting them in a spreadsheet because I'm outlining, I'm developing characters, I'm doing things that will contribute to the book, but it's not actually word count for that novel. So I spend a lot of time doing that. And some days I just sit and daydream because I'm thinking this stuff up that I'm going to put in the spreadsheet. So all that is time that I'm working, but not necessarily contributing to my word count. So I don't count that as days I'm not working, but then I get to the point to where, okay, now I'm supposed to be putting words in this specific document every day. And I try to make myself do that 5 days a week.
I like that you called them investment days because that really is exactly what they are. is you're building something, and that's part of the process. So I think as long as you keep your head in the story, whether it's plotting or jotting down notes or adding to the manuscript, that's important because when you take that day or two off, you pull yourself out of the story, and it seems to me that it gets harder to get back in.
I absolutely agree with that. And it's almost like for me, I go mentally elsewhere. I am in another world. And if anything that pulls me out of that world back into reality and into, what is actually in this place and time, as opposed to that place and time, it takes me a while to get back into my story and to be productive again. So the more time I stay away from it, the less connected to it I am. And the most that it's safe for me to stay away from it is, the 2 days over the weekend. And then on Monday, I have to be back at the computer, back writing. And, I really don't want to take any more time than that away from it. Now, there have been times when I've had to do that because, there's a vacation that we've had scheduled forever. And again, I don't work on vacation because I'm spending time, with my husband or family or whatever. So there have been times when I've had to do that, but it's not ideal for me at all. I don't like being disconnected from my story any longer than the 2 days that are the weekend. And I find that if I edit, usually what I do starting, when I sit down to write, is I will edit what I wrote the day before, and that gets me back into the story. It's like that's my passage back to my fictional world. And then I just keep writing until there's nothing else in me for that day. And then I step away from it. And the next day I edit, what I wrote the day before and start over. But that's sort of my entry point that gets me back into the story.
Now you've been doing this for a number of years as a published author. What is the most gratifying part of being a published author?
Oh gosh, for me, it's those emails that you get, and I know you guys have gotten them. Readers who just really connected with your work, and in some way, your book helped them through a difficult time. They were sitting with their mother at the hospital, or they were sitting with their husband during chemotherapy, or whatever it is. There's some difficult thing that reading really helped them through, and they send you an email and they thank you for writing this book that helped them through this difficult time. And that to me is just, that's gold.
Who's been your biggest supporter as you
Oh,
built your craft?
definitely my husband. And for years, our joke was that he was a patron of the arts because the company that I worked for had gone out of business, and we had decided that I could pursue the writing thing. And so I wasn't getting a paycheck, while I was figuring this stuff out. So yeah, he was my patron of the arts, and that was our joke. So he definitely has been my biggest supporter, and he's just always had such faith in me that I could do this, even way more faith than I ever had in me. And even still, he's my biggest cheerleader, my biggest fan, my biggest supporter, and I'm very grateful for him.
You said you were doing it without a paycheck. I remember someone once said, do you love writing novels so much that you do it for free? And I said, I did it for free for years.
it's,
You know, I,
it's
I was always hoping it would come to something, but
yeah, you have to do it for a long time for free before you get paid for it, don't you?
isn't that the
Yeah.
truth? And have you ever had somebody say something that was discouraging or negative that made you want to prove them wrong or succeed even more?
Um, you know, I can't really think of a time where someone was just, well, I can't really think of a time where someone, said something that discouraged me to that level. There, of course, have been times when I have read, review that was discouraging or whatever, and I have my mantra is there is no book that is every person's cup of tea. And I just have to keep telling myself that. And I think it's the truth. I really do, because there are books, major books, that have made millions of dollars that everyone loves, but there are some people who don't love them. And so I have to keep telling myself that with reviews, because, there are always going to be a few people who read your book and don't love it. It doesn't matter who you are. And so that I think I have sort of gotten my head around, and I just keep that mantra. But I can't really think of anything else that discouraged me. Now, there was a period of time when I was querying agents, when I was very discouraged because I had finished a manuscript and I really wanted to move forward with this process. And, you know, that's soul sucking, sending queries to a number of agents and getting back these replies. It's just, oh, you write beautifully. It's, this is, keep writing, but this is not for me. Or this is one of the things they say. There's certain things that they say it's either not for them, or they don't have a place in their list right now, or whatever. That was very discouraging. That was soul sucking because there was, nothing wrong with your writing. It's just not for me. So it's like a numbers game. You have to find that person that it connects with. And that was discouraging for a while.
But it makes success all the more sweet, I think.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, we can all say that now, but
Yeah.
at the time, it's like, oh, this is hard. This might be too hard.
I hear you.
Yeah. So, Susan, what's the why when it comes to your novels? Like, what do you hope readers take from them on like a soul level?
Honestly, for me, I write to entertain. And that really is my only goal. I write to entertain. I want to take someone away to a place that they want to go and tell them a story that they find entertaining for the length of the book. And there may be other takeaways. And sometimes I'll stand back and look at it after I've written the book. And I can see that there are certain things that somebody might take away from the book, and that's gratifying. But I don't write with that goal. I write simply to entertain and take somebody away somewhere for a while.
Yeah, I love that. And I can remember taking a screenwriting class years and years ago. And the young woman who taught, she started the class out by scrawling on the chalkboard, why do you want to write? And she said, here's my answer: to change the world. And I thought, oh, this is not for me. I know for sure I have nothing inside of me that will change the world. So once I figured out that it was actually okay to entertain readers, it was very freeing.
Right.
Well, and that is changing the world. Like what Susan talked about, the person who read it during a difficult time and it helped them through it. I mean, that's a little piece of the world you made better. But it is daunting to think that you're going to do something so gargantuan that the world is going to change. I mean, you have to have a pretty big ego, I think.
But
Yes.
that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself too, that you could write something that would change the world. I mean, really, has anyone ever done that? I mean, except for, like religious, the Bible, things
Right.
like that, aside from that, has anyone ever really written a novel that changed the world? I don't think so.
I would agree with you there. Now, I know your readers are probably wondering, what are you working on right now?
So right now I'm working on the next Liz Talbot mystery, and the title is Low Country Lies. And I do not know when that is coming out because I have not finished it yet, for the biggest reason, and also because I'm at a point where I will be changing publishers. I don't know yet who the new publisher is going to be, or how this is going to actually make its way to the world, but I know that it will one way or another. I just have to go through certain steps to get there. And the first one is I have to finish this novel, but it will be out as soon as I can get it out.
All right. So at the end, we just ask a series of 10 kind of fun questions, and you don't overthink them, just sort of blurt out your answer. First one is, what is one food that will never get past your lips?
Liver.
That's mine too. Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Oh, wow. Reese Witherspoon.
She would be perfect. She'd be a good Liz too.
I always thought that. And then when I sold the film rights, the woman with the production company said to me, she's too old to play Liz, right? And I'm like, well, in my head, she's that age.
Right. Well, she has a look-alike daughter, so maybe she could be Liz.
There you go.
What superpower would you pick if you had the choice?
Oh, wow. What superpower? I don't know. That's hard. Um, I would like to be able to eat anything I want and be thin. Can I pick that?
Yes, you
Yes.
can.
And I would like to also have that be mine. I never could figure out what I wanted. Now I know.
That's the best one we've heard yet.
It is. Oh, that's good. At the end of your life, what do you hope you'll have accomplished?
Oh, wow. I hope that there will be someone there will be people who feel like, the world, their lives are a better place, or this world is a better place because I was in it for a while. I don't know. That's hard. Gosh. Because I don't think I'm doing anything particularly earth shattering, but, I would like to think that I left the world a better place in some way.
What's the worst job you've ever had?
Oh gosh. I once worked at a fast food restaurant. That was horrible.
If you could instantly become an expert at something, what would it be?
Writing books.
Okay, so far we're kind of twins, Susan. I'm just going to say, all of our answers have been the same. What's your favorite scent?
Oh gosh, sort of a citrusy. I like citrus.
What is the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
Whew, I'm sorry. You said to just say the first thing, and I'm trying to think of even one thing. You know, Going up in a hot air balloon was pretty scary, but I think there probably have been scarier things. I just can't think of them right now.
Well, you can tell us next time you
Okay.
visit with us.
Okay.
When people pronounce words incorrectly, do you let them know?
No, I don't, because I'm certain I do that. Because I think it's common among people who read a lot, because if you have read more, you sometimes the first time you see a word, you it's pronounced a certain way in your head. You're not hearing it out loud. And I have done this before. I have said a word, and my husband will correct me. And it's like I've the first few times I ever saw the word, I was seeing it on the page, and so in my head it was pronounced a certain way, which was inaccurate. I didn't hear somebody say it. I just saw it on the page and I sounded it out. So I think that people who read a lot do this. And yeah, no, I don't ever correct anybody's pronunciation. I'm not that confident of my own.
Right. If you could live your life over again, would you?
Oh, sure. But I want to take all the knowledge that I have now back to when I start over.
Yes, that would be good. All right. Well, this has been really fun. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
Thank you,
thank you
Susan.
so much for having me. This has been so much fun. It's always fun to chat with the two of you. And this is great. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and post a question in the comment section. This has been Behind the Book.